I'm Joe Drammissi, a board member of the San Diego County Gun Owners Political Action Committee. The following presentation is titled Gun Control, Myths and Facts. This presentation is appropriate for any group, no matter what their level of expertise on Second Amendment and gun issues. If you're interested in having gun control myths and facts presented at one of your group functions, please email us at info@sdcgo.org. This can be a lunch or a monthly meeting or even a special event for a social group, community organization, religious group, or political group. This is a free educational outreach service we provide so you can see the facts. Welcome to Gun Control Myths and Facts, a presentation brought to you by San Diego County Gun Owners. The purpose of the presentation is to provide some accurate information regarding the gun control laws, particularly in California, and then the subject of guns and gun control in general in the current political environment, I guess is the way to look at it. So the agenda, some things we'll talk about today. We'll introduce San Diego County gun owners, just talk about who we are, what we do, some information like that. Then we'll make an outrageous statement, which I'll ask you to hang on to and keep in mind, and we'll come back to that at the end of the presentation. We'll take a look at the Second Amendment briefly and talk about what the conflict is, or the discussion between two sides. Generally in the debate, one side views the Second Amendment from one position, another side views it from another position, and that's what the conflict is about nowadays. So we'll take a look at that. Then we'll go through some gun control laws, some that are already enacted in California, others that are working their way through the process. We'll wrap up the presentation with some ideas about what you can do to be involved in this and get more information on it, and then some resources where you can get some accurate information. So if we take a look at San Diego County Gun Owners, San Diego County Gun Owners is a political action committee. We're a group composed of ordinary citizens from all walks of life who are concerned about our Second Amendment rights. The San Diego County Gun Owners is involved in Second Amendment advocacy at the county level and municipal level. And what we do basically is we work within San Diego County, and we work with the cities. There are 18 cities in the county. We work with the cities, with city council members, with mayors of these cities, and at the county supervisor level to get leaders elected that are supportive of our Second Amendment rights. We help organize and educate the public regarding gun rights issues. There's unfortunately a lot of incorrect or misinformation that's out there now, and part of what we do as San Diego County Gun Owners is we organize, we try to educate the public through things like this presentation, through different meetings and events, to try to bring out the real accurate information so people can make an informed decision on these things, on these subjects. So that's one of the big things that we do. Fundraising is another thing that we do. In order to influence the political process in the county, it takes numbers of people, so we have to represent lots of people, which we do, and it takes money. So fundraising is a big part of what we're involved in. And then working with the San Diego County gun owner or gun community to do all of the above. So that's kind of what San Diego County Gun Owners does. So the outrageous statement that I would make here is that we do not have a gun problem in the United States. Making that statement, if you were to look at what you see in the media every day, what you see on the entertainment industry or from the entertainment industry, things that you hear from our political leaders, it sounds like we have an enormous problem in this country. When you actually look at the numbers and you look at the data and the accurate information, the data kind of says something different. So we'll take a look at that. So hold on to that statement here, and we'll come back to that near the end of the presentation. There are people who argue against gun ownership and carrying guns because they see it as a public safety issue. However, there is no legitimate data that supports this view. Most people would be hard-pressed to recall an instance of violent crime that they've read about that made them think it's a good thing those victims were not armed. So the Second Amendment, for those of you that aren't familiar with the Second Amendment, exactly, this is what it is. Some people expect the Second Amendment, that if they haven't seen it or they're not aware of it, they know generally what it is. Some people expect it to be several pages long or dozens of pages long. It's actually a sentence. And what the Second Amendment says It says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And that's really all it is. And it was accepted with 9 other amendments on December 15th, 1791. So the conflict or the debate over the Second Amendment, if we take a look at that, there's 2 sides to this debate. There's one side that focuses on the part of the Second Amendment that says the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And people that are on that side of the debate interpret this as an individual right theory. What that's saying is individual Americans have the right to keep and bear arms. There's another group, the other side of the debate, that focuses on the prefatory language or the prefatory statement. Prefatory statement is the introductory statement, and they focus on the part of the Second Amendment that says a well-regulated militia. And the interpretation there is that it's not an individual right, it's a collective right, and it's the right of the states to maintain a militia. So that's really the debate between the 2 sides. So if we take a look at some real numbers, I was saying there's some misinformation or some misleading numbers. So if we take a look at some real numbers here, if we look at how many people actually live in the United States, according to the Census Bureau, as of July 2015, there were about 321 million people living in the United States. Of those 320 million people, about 100, somewhere between 100 million and 150 million of those people own guns. So that would mean somewhere between a third and half of the people that live in the United States are gun owners. It's difficult to get exact information, which is probably a good thing. There's not a federal registry per se that exists that lists all of the gun owners. So this information comes from various places. But on the low end of the estimate, it's about 100 million people. On the high end, about 150 million people. So how many individual guns in America? Again, it's hard to get exact information. Estimates are between about 250 million individual guns and about 300 million. Most people that own guns own more than a single gun. Again, estimates come from different places, but somewhere between 250 million and 300 million individual guns in the United States. So how many firearms-related deaths would you think are in the United States or that occur yearly? From information from the Center for Disease Control for data for 2014, the CDC says there were 33,594 gun-related deaths in the United States in 2014. If we look at how many firearms-related deaths are suicides, we come up with a number of 21,334 for that year as well from the CDC. So sometimes when we're talking about misinformation out there or misleading information, a lot of times people that are gun control advocates that want to take that gun right away from people, that don't want people to own guns, will throw out that number of 33,000 gun-related deaths in the United States. What they don't tell you is 2/3 of those are actually suicides, which are kind of a different problem. Suicides aren't necessarily a gun problem. They're more of a mental health issue. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. So we have that many of those deaths are suicides. The Center for Disease Control, or CDC, established in 1946, is a federal agency that is designed to be a non-political national public health institute. Their goal is to protect public health and safety through the control and prevention of disease. The data used in this presentation from the CDC comes from survey information collected by the CDC. We use their raw data, not interpretations. So when we look at gun control laws, people that advocate for gun control laws, what are the reasons that we say we want gun control laws? Typically, the reasons are to reduce gun violence. So you'll see if you tune into the news every night, there's almost always a shooting of some sort somewhere going on, and they attribute that, they call that gun violence. So we always want to reduce that level of gun violence. People say we want to reduce crime, so we need to control the guns. We need to essentially take guns away to reduce crime. The other reason they talk about is to increase public safety. So those are really the 3 big reasons why gun control advocates push and say we need gun control laws. So do gun control laws achieve these goals? Something else to consider. You have to ask yourself, do violent criminals obey the law? Do violent criminals not do something because there's a law against it? Something to consider. Do legal gun owners typically obey the law? Again, remember in this country we have somewhere between 100 million and 150 million legal gun owners. So you have to ask yourself, do they typically obey the law? Do legal gun owners pose a threat to public safety? That might be another question to ask here or to consider. So 100 to 150 million gun owners in this country. There were, in 2014, according to the Centers for Disease Control, there were 461 firearms-related accidental deaths. So out of 321 million people, 100 to 150 million gun owners, 461 accidental firearms deaths. So again, keep that in mind when you're thinking about public safety. According to the FBI data, there were 8,124 firearms-related murders in 2014. So again, you have to, in context, thinking about out of 321 million people in this country, 100 million to 150 million legal gun owners, 250 million to 300 million actual guns, 8,124 firearms-related murders. Of those firearms-related murders, the FBI estimates that probably at least half of those are gang-related. These are gang members shooting each other basically over drugs, over money, over territory, over gang-related things. So at least half of those are accounted for by that. So if we look a little further here at some more real numbers, again, we said there were 33,594 firearms-related deaths, according to the CDC, for the year 2014. We have, out of those 33,594 firearms-related deaths, 21,334 were suicides. So we have 461 firearms-related accidental deaths that year, 8,124 firearms-related murders. 248 firearms-related murders involved rifles. And that's another point you want to remember here. Here in California, one of the big hot button issues is what they call assault rifles, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There's a big push to ban assault rifles. A lot of the gun control advocates, that's usually high on their list. And you want to remember that, again, out of our 321 million people in this country, 248 of them were killed with rifles of all sorts, not just assault-style rifles, but rifles of all kinds. So again, you need to keep that in perspective, I think, as we talk about this. So we had 248 firearms-related murders that involved rifles. If you look at other murders that took place in that year, and the reason we look at 2014 because we have data here from the CDC and from the FBI, and that's the last year that both of those organizations published data. So that's what we're looking at here. The data is relatively consistent from year to year, but that's the last year we had data from both. So that's why you see that here. That's why we're looking at 2014. So if we look at other murders, 1,567 involved knives or cutting instruments. That's quite a bit more, probably 5 times as many as involved rifles. 660 murders were done with just the bare hands or feet. So again, that was in 2014. So if we just take a look at that compared to what happens with firearms, you see these other things. And this is important to keep this in context when we have this debate between gun control and people that advocate for the Second Amendment. So if you look at other deaths, 3,995 accidental drownings that year. Out here. So, keeping things in context, it doesn't seem like that guns are the public safety issue that some people say they are, but we just keep that in mind as we go here. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, is our nation's premier federal law enforcement agency operating under the U.S. Department of Justice. Since the 1920s, the FBI has compiled and stored raw data on crime, and especially violent crime. These numbers include data on firearms and other weapons used in the commission of crimes. The FBI produces the Uniform Crime Reports, or UCR. The UCR is a nationwide statistical effort involving over 19,000 city, college, county, state, tribal, and federal law enforcement agencies that contribute crime statistics from their jurisdictions. So if we take a look at the suicide rate, if we go back to that, 21,334 firearms-related suicides in 2014. The graphic that's up here now was, I believe, from 2008. But if you look at this, There are a number of countries that, from the 2008 data, that had significantly higher suicide rates than the United States. Japan leads the world, unfortunately, with suicide rates in their country, followed by France, and then we see Canada, then we see Germany. All of those are higher than the suicide rate that we see in the United States. Each of those countries has gun control laws that we would probably consider severe in the United States. Each of those has more strict gun control laws than the United States has, yet their suicide rates are higher. In Japan, which leads the world in suicides, did in 2008 and still does today, unfortunately. In Japan, no one owns a gun in terms of their citizens. The police have guns, the criminals have guns, the average citizen do not have guns, yet they have this suicide issue. So if we come back to 2015 and we look at information from the World Health Organization, we can see that the United States ranked 48 out of 107 in suicides per 100,000 people. And again, most of those countries that have higher suicide rates than we have much more severe gun control laws. The United States is kind of unique in that it provides its citizens the right to own firearms. So again, suicide is a mental health issue. It's not really a gun issue. So something to keep in mind when we look at these numbers. This presentation uses data from both the FBI and the CDC. Differences in exact numbers between these two organizations can be attributed to slight differences in definitions and terminology. For instance, the FBI tracks murders, which are defined as the unlawful killing of a human being. The CDC tracks homicides, which include not only murders but deaths resulting from lawful police or civilian self-defense shootings. So one of the other things we want to take a look at is mass shootings. We've had a number of those in recent years, and really not as many as you would think. Mass shootings are actually quite rare in this country, even though you wouldn't know that from looking at the media and watching news events and things. When a tragic event like that does happen, the tendency is to cover that 24/7 basically on the news media. You'll see the same clips running over and over again. They make it look much worse than it is, and they portray it as if this is something that happens all the time. This is a tremendous problem. It's obviously tragic when it does happen, but relatively speaking, it's not very common. If we've recently had some politicians and some leaders that would make statements about how we are the only country, the United States is the only country that has these mass shootings. No other country has them. That information isn't really accurate or correct. If we look at the slide that's up here now, if we look at mass shootings, and we're using the FBI definition for a mass shooting, which is the FBI considers it a mass shooting if 4 or more people are killed, not including the shooter. So that's how they define a mass shooting. So using that definition and then comparing them in deaths per million or frequency per million, because the other thing you want to look at is if we're going to compare the United States and mass shootings and deaths related to mass shootings with other countries, it's not really accurate to compare the United States with 321 million people to a country that has a population of 4 million people. So a more accurate way to do it is to compare them in deaths per million, say, if we're looking at deaths like that. So if we look at the graphic that's on the screen now, you could see that in frequency of events, of mass shooting events per million people, the United States actually ranks 12th in the world with this. And if some of the countries that rank higher than the United States might be a little bit surprising. You could see Switzerland, Norway, Belgium, France, all of which again would have gun control laws that we would consider severe in this country, yet the frequency of mass shootings per million people in those countries is higher than it is here. If we look at deaths per million people that are related to mass shootings, again, you can see the United States ranks 11th. You have countries that are much higher than ours. You see Norway up at the top, France, Switzerland, Finland, Belgium. These are countries that most people would probably say that's surprising that they're up there. Norway is kind of an anomaly. If you remember back in 2011, there was a horrific mass shooting over there where an individual blew up a government office, then went to an island where it was kind of a summer camp there. And he shot, I believe it was over 70 something people, wounded another 100. That kind of put Norway at the top of the list there. But in general, those kinds of things are rare. They're rare around the world. They're definitely rare in the United States. But again, you wouldn't get that impression. So if we look at gun control laws, and do they really reduce or impact mass shootings? Other questions, or another question to ask, do bans on assault-style rifles reduce mass public shootings? And we'll talk about exactly what that is here in a minute. The assault-style rifles, the estimates are there are probably between 10 and 15 million of those in the United States. Today, they're actually the most popular rifle platform in the United States today, and we'll take a look at that here in a minute. If we look at some of the weapons used in mass public shootings, we could take a look at that and see 68% of mass public shootings involve handguns, and which makes sense if you think about it. Handguns are more easily concealed, so when people do these sorts of things, handguns are involved a lot of the time. Rifles account for 12% of guns involved in mass shootings, and then shotguns 8%, and then various combinations of those. So this is what it looks like. Again, these are some accurate numbers. We go back to the discussion about assault rifles. You'll hear on the gun control side, people are always there's always a big push to try to ban assault style rifles or assault rifles. The term itself, assault rifle, is actually inaccurate. When the military talks about an assault rifle, generally they're talking about a rifle that shoots that's a fully automatic rifle that shoots continuous rounds with a single pull of the trigger, basically. Rifles like that have been illegal in the United States since the mid-'80s, and they continue to be illegal in the United States. What people call assault rifles, if you look at the slide here, all three of these rifles that are pictured on the screen right now have the same capability in terms of the power of the rounds that they shoot, in terms of the rate of fire, in terms of their range, accuracy. These are all pretty similar. The one in the center is considered an assault rifle, and that's the one that, again, the anti-gun people always want to ban. And it's really no different than the other ones. It's different in appearance is really pretty much it. Yet that's the focus of these bans. And even the name, like we were saying, there's so much information. The platform or the style of rifle that you're looking at is an AR-15. The AR, contrary to what a lot of people believe, does not stand for assault rifle. The AR stands for the company that came up with the design back in the 50s, Armalite Rifle. And that's again just part of the information here. So if we move on a little bit more about assault rifles, again, the sale and purchase of fully automatic weapons has been illegal in the United States since the mid-'80s. It continues to be illegal today. That's probably something that most Second Amendment advocates would support, that they probably should remain illegal. The sale and purchase of parts to convert a semi-automatic rifle to fully automatic is also illegal. Yes, there are people in the United States and all over, I suppose, that have the technical skill and knowledge to do it, but it's not the average gun owner. The average gun owner could not convert easily their semi-automatic AR-style platform to a fully automatic military-style rifle. Again, that would be illegal to do it. To purchase the parts to do that would be illegal. So we have laws in place to kind of stop that. Remember earlier we said that of the 8,100 and something firearms-related deaths in 2014, 248 of those involved rifles, a tiny percentage. Only a fraction of those 248 involved the assault-style rifles. So you would actually need to ask yourself, do these assault-style rifles, or what they're calling assault rifles, the AR-style rifles, do they pose a real threat to public safety? Looking at the real numbers, you would probably think not, especially if you remember, again, 10 million to 15 million of those rifles in the United States. Yet if you look at the number of those rifles that are actually involved in shootings, it's fairly low. So what that's saying is, just like with all the other firearms that are here, the overwhelming vast majority of legal gun owners own their guns and operate and use their guns in accordance with the law and in a responsible manner. So it really isn't the problem that some people would say it is. There was another quote by some law enforcement people that said, if you were to ban all the assault style rifles, all the AR style rifles in the country today, if you could wave a magic wand and make them all disappear, it would be almost impossible to measure the impact that that might have on shootings, on murders, on crimes, because they're used so infrequently by criminals. Yet again, in the media, when that unfortunately does happen from time to time, the impression is that this is a huge problem and this is happening every day, and it really is not. A lot of people ask if there are any gun control laws that we as gun owners support. The answer is yes. Gun owners have a long history of supporting laws creating background checks and creating federally licensed dealers who run those background checks. Gun owners support laws that prevent selling guns to criminals and the mentally unfit. The reason for that support is that we are concerned about the ability of citizens to protect themselves from violent criminals. The best tool to defend against a violent attack is a firearm. It should be possible for a law-abiding, trained citizen to own firearms and be able to carry a firearm outside the home for self-protection. So if we take a look at some recent gun control laws that were enacted in California, and you'll see on the slide at the bottom it says, ask yourself why. And when we take a look at some of these laws, I want you to keep that in mind and ask yourself that question. If we take a look at here, Assembly Bill 1135, and most of these laws were passed recently in our last election, actually, as part of Prop 63. And these laws are in various stages now of being enacted. Some of them are being challenged legally. Some of them have been partially implemented. But if you take a look at these laws and what they're supposed to do, you want to ask yourself why. Why is this law? Why is this something that we should have, basically? So Assembly Bill 1135, what this did was it effectively outlawed what they were calling bullet buttons. On the AR-style rifle platform, you have a magazine on there that holds the ammunition. On those typical rifles, and which is true of those rifles in most states throughout the country, there's only a handful of states that have an issue with these. But in most states, you push a button, the magazine drops out, and you replace the magazine with fresh ammunition. In California, they outlawed that, and the workaround to the outlaw was to install a button that instead of just pushing the button, you had to use a tool. It turns out that the most prevalent design that came up would work with using the tip of a bullet, hence the name bullet button. So now what this law does is outlaw those, and essentially what it does is it redefines what they're calling an assault rifle. And they're saying if your rifle has a detachable magazine, so if your magazine comes out of the rifle without having to open the chamber of the rifle, or without having to open the rifle up, if it has that capability, a removable magazine, and one of 4 other features, then it's considered an assault rifle and it has to be registered. So that's what this law does. The other 4 features really have no impact on how the rifle operates. The other 4 features are a collapsible or a telescopic stock, which is actually used to make the rifle fit better with different size people. If I've got 2 individuals that have the same rifle, if I own one of those rifles and I shoot it and my wife wants to shoot it, if we can adjust the stock, it makes it easier for her to be able to shoot it. Law enforcement uses this feature so that they can shoot the rifle comfortably if they're wearing body armor or if they're not wearing body armor. But it really doesn't impact how the rifle works. So a collapsible stock, a pistol grip, on the rifle, a forward vertical grip on the rifle, and then a flash suppressor. Any one of those 4 things plus a removable stock or plus a removable magazine makes this an assault rifle, which needs to be registered. So again, you have to ask yourself, why is that? How does that reduce crime? Remember, criminals probably aren't paying much attention to this at all, and they rarely use assault rifles anyway. But how does it reduce crime? How does it increase public safety? So you want to ask yourself why with these things. Assembly Bill 1695 creates a basically a 10-year prohibition for someone to own firearms if they falsely report a lost or stolen firearm. Again, you want to ask yourself when you look at these laws, how does that increase our public safety? How does that reduce crime? Senate Bill 880 is essentially the same as the Assembly Bill 1135, the assault rifle bill. So Senate Bill 1235, if we take a look at that one, places unjustified, it says, and burdensome restrictions on the purchase of ammunition. So when this law goes into effect, what this does is it means when you go to a store to buy ammunition for your firearms, you will have to first register with the state. The state will have to give you permission, authorize you basically to buy ammunition, so you'll be entered into their registry. When you go buy that ammunition, the store, wherever you buy it, is going to have to report what you bought, when you bought it, how much you bought to the state, who will keep track of that. Again, you want to ask yourself, why is that? How does that reduce crime? You have to picture, do criminals typically buy ammunition now by walking into a store and buying it? So how does it reduce crime? How does it make us safer as the public? So you want to ask yourself these questions. Okay, so if we look at this next one, Senate Bill 1446 bans the possession of ammunition feeding devices. So this is the high-capacity magazine bill that they talk about. So what happened back in 2000, I believe, is that the state came out and said, okay, any magazines that hold more than 10 rounds are now illegal to sell or to buy within the state. You can still possess those if you have them, but you can't buy or sell them within the state. Now, with this new law, it's no longer legal to possess them. So now you have to get rid of them, you have to turn them in, you have to destroy them. It's now becomes a crime to possess them. And they describe these as high-capacity magazines. One of the things you want to consider is these are really standard magazines. The fact that a magazine holds 10 rounds or more is a standard magazine. For instance, when I bought my the last handgun I bought a couple of years ago, because I bought it here in California, it came with two 10-round magazines. If I would have bought that same exact handgun in probably 43 of the 50 states, it would have come with two 15-round magazines. 15-round are standard. Yet in California, they've been banned. So again, you want to ask yourself why this is. How does this increase public safety? How does this reduce crime? Remember, criminals probably aren't paying attention to this. The other thing, too, is because these are standard magazines and they're available in most other states, it's a simple matter to drive for an hour or two, go out of state, buy as many as you want, come back. So again, for criminals, they don't care. It does not impact criminals. The other thing to look at, too, is in the instances where there were mass shootings, a lot of the time, the majority of the time, people did not have high-capacity magazines. A magazine could be reloaded or replaced in seconds, and it really doesn't impact things. They banned, they tried to ban, or they banned what they were calling high-capacity magazines at the federal level years ago, and then they let that ban run out because they discovered that it was ineffective. It had no impact at all on anything. So when we pass these laws out here in California, as a citizen, you need to ask yourself why. Why are we passing these laws if they don't decrease crime and they don't increase our public safety? So you should always ask yourself that question here. This one, Assembly Bill 1511, would make it illegal to lend a firearm to a friend. If you were transferring a firearm or lending a firearm, say, to a buddy that was going hunting, or if they shot competitively, they wanted to try one of your handguns, this would now make it illegal to do that. There are very limited exceptions where you could do that, but essentially now, with this bill becoming law, to do this legally, you would have to go to a licensed firearm dealer. Basically, you'd have to go to a gun shop. If you wanted to lend your friend one of your guns, they would have to go through a background check, pay a fee, wait 10 days before you could give them the gun. You would have to go through that all over again when he wanted to return the gun. I would, again, ask yourself why that is. How does that make us safer? How does that reduce crime? Just briefly to take a look at these quickly. Storage and security requirements, SB 464. California already has some of the most stringent security requirements for gun shops for people that sell guns. In terms of how they have to store the guns and lock the guns up at night when the store's not open. What this does is impose additional requirements on those store owners. You have to remember that gun store owners or gun shop owners, for the most parts, these places are family-run businesses. These are not huge, in general, these are not huge corporations. So when you impose something that's going to cost these stores $10,000 or $15,000 to comply with, this is a big deal to a lot of these businesses. So again, you have to ask yourself why that is. Could it be that you're trying to discourage those people or those stores from being in business, maybe to drive them out of business or discourage people from opening stores like that? Again, you should ask yourself why. SB 497 expands the existing one handgun a month law to include all guns. Again, there's some limited exceptions there, but what does that do? How does that make us safer by saying that, okay, people cannot buy more than one gun per month? If I had two sons and I wanted to buy each of them a gun for Christmas, say, I could not buy those together. I would have to buy them a month apart. What does that do? How does that make us safer? How does that impact crime? AB 7 extends California's ban on open carry of an unloaded firearm. Again, this came about because there were some cities, particularly in the area of Los Angeles, there were some areas that were kind of surrounded by developed areas that were undeveloped, and technically open carry was okay in the undeveloped part of the city, but not in other areas. So they extended the ban. Again, that might make sense in that situation. The problem is it applies to lots of other areas. In San Diego County, we have a huge part of the county is rural. It would impact those folks. So again, asking yourself why that is a good thing to do. The last one here, AB 424, removes the authority of a school district superintendent or her designee to temporarily authorize someone to be able to carry concealed on campus. So in other words, if there was someone who was already authorized by the state to carry concealed, so they've been through the background checks, they've been through the training, they've done everything they need to do, but schools at the moment are considered gun-free zones, so they couldn't carry there. But if a school board or a superintendent wanted to make an exception for a specific individual, with this bill being passed into law, the superintendent or the school board would no longer be able to do that. It takes the local control away, gives it back to Sacramento. You have to ask yourself why that is. How does that make us safer? How does that reduce crime? The laws currently being proposed are beyond reasonable. Many current gun control laws have little to do with increasing public safety or reducing crime. Gun control advocates appear to be simply against guns and use public safety as a way to advance their anti-gun agenda. Why do I say that? Because we can't find an example of a gun control law that went too far for the anti-gun lobby. There isn't a single gun law that they have gone on record to oppose. The anti-Second Amendment groups have supported all restrictions, reasonable or not, to limit your ability to own a firearm and carry a firearm. So what can you do about some of these things? If you ask yourself that question, if you ask yourself why, and you don't like the answer you're getting back, what can you do? Again, address the biggest dangers. The biggest dangers we face from gun control advocates and what they call gun grabbers, I guess. Biggest danger is apathy and giving up on the part of gun owners. When people say, well, what can you do? It's the law. There's nothing I can do about it. And they just give up like that, or they don't care at all. They don't see how it impacts them directly. Maybe they own hunting rifles or they own shotguns and they hunt and do things like that, but they don't own an AR style rifle. So the ban on AR style rifles doesn't impact them and they don't care. That's the biggest danger for us. That's how we got to the point where we are now. California didn't get this way overnight. It's not going to get fixed overnight. But over the last 20 or 30 years of really what happened is gun owners being apathetic about this. That's how this stuff got to this point. There's probably I believe about 39 million people living in California in the state. There's probably 10 million gun owners out here, more than enough to change this situation. Yet, if they become apathetic or if they take the attitude of giving up, then they don't. The other side wins on there. So that's how we got to this point. So that's one of the biggest dangers is apathy and giving up on the part of gun owners. Something you could do then to deal with this is to educate yourself. Like we were saying, there's a tremendous amount of misinformation. If you think about it, people that don't own guns, if you grew up in a house where no one hunted or no one shot recreationally or there were no guns around, where would you learn about guns? Where would you get your information? Chances are you'd get it from the media, from news organizations, from what you see on TV or what you see in movies. You have to remember that a lot of people get their information that way. Most of that information is incorrect. Unfortunately, a lot of it is intentionally incorrect. So the best way to deal with this or to combat this is to educate yourself. Find out the real information. That's one of the points or the purpose of this presentation. And at the end of this, I'll show you some we'll show you some resources where you can find that good information. The other thing you want to do is speak up to correct information. When people say things that are obviously incorrect and you know them to be incorrect, you want to challenge those people. And you don't want to be aggressive about it. You don't want to be that guy. But you do want to ask them a simple question. Why do you feel that way? Or what makes you say that? Chances are the response you'll get back is going to be based in something that you know is incorrect, and you could address that issue and talk to people. Most people, if given the correct information, would not support these kinds of laws. Most people are rational, intelligent adults. People that are hard over on the other side, you're not going to be able to do much with those. But the vast majority of people are in the middle. They just don't know. So what you can do to help this thing is educate yourself and then speak up when you hear that kind of misinformation. Support local leaders who support the Second Amendment. In San Diego County, if you go to the San Diego County Gun Owners website, SDCGO.com, you'll find a list of officials around the county that we endorse. Before we endorse someone, we go through, we vet their voting record. Our executive director, Michael Schwartz, talks to these people and interviews these people, and we get a pretty good idea of where they stand regarding the Second Amendment. What you want to do is you want to support those people. The more people we get elected locally throughout San Diego County, the better it'll be for us. The other thing to keep in mind is most of the people that are in Sacramento, the elected officials that write these laws and pass these laws, started out locally. They started on city councils, they were city mayors, they were on water boards. The more people that are pro-Second Amendment that we could get elected locally, the better it'll be for us, and eventually will help change the situation statewide. So those are things you can do. Introduce new people to the shooting sports. That's another great thing you could do. At San Diego County Gun Owners, we do shooting socials. We tend to do several a month that introduce brand new first-time shooters to the shooting sports. What we'll do is we'll hold it at a local range. People will come in, they will get a safety briefing from the range personnel, and then we'll pair each of the new shooters up with one of us. We'll act as mentors, we'll use our firearms, and we give them a good, safe, fun first-time shooting experience. You want to try to do that. Bring new people into the shooting sports. Get involved. There's three things, especially out here in California, that all of us should be doing as gun owners. Everyone should belong to San Diego County Gun Owners. It's cheap and easy to do. It costs you $10 a month. If you have time and you want to get involved, we have lots of volunteer opportunities to get involved in. If you're like a lot of people and you're very busy, you don't have time, your membership and your $10 a month will help the rest of us try to restore and protect our Second Amendment rights. The second organization that you should belong to, all gun owners should belong to this, is the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Whereas we work locally within San Diego County, California Rifle and Pistol Association is a statewide organization. They maintain a full-time lobbyist in Sacramento. They're the ones that focus on these things at the state level. they're the organizations that bring the lawsuits, that challenge these laws. So you could support them for $35 a year. All of us gun owners out here should do that. The third one is the National Rifle Association. All gun owners should belong to the National Rifle Association. They're the main reason we probably still have the rights that we have. They have 5 million members nationwide. That number should probably be 40 or 50 million. Again, for $40 a year, you could belong to that organization. So all three of these organizations advocate for the Second Amendment. They help restore and preserve your Second Amendment rights. They do it at different levels. So these are things you should get involved in. If we look at the final slide here, we see resources. These are some resources where you can get good, accurate information on gun control laws and on the subject of just guns in America in general. The Crime Prevention Research Center is probably the best place to look for the most accurate information that's available out there. The center is run by John Lott, who is a researcher, has been doing this for years, since the 90s. Originally, he was an economist and was not a gun person. He is not funded, or this group is not funded by the NRA. They are not funded by ammunition manufacturers, gun manufacturers. They're an academic group. Some of the best data is available there, so you can see the website. The FBI Crime Data Service. The FBI publishes an enormous amount of data that they gather every year from across the country related to all sorts of different crimes. It's broken down by state. It's broken down by crime. Excellent source of information. The Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, is another excellent source of information on this stuff. California legislative information, looking at each of these individual laws, you could look each of them up on that website. You'll see an analysis where they break the laws down into everyday language, where they're a little bit more easily understood. You'll see where the laws stand in terms of the process of going through the legislature. You'll see where the bills and the proposals stand, and you'll see where the laws are. California Department of Justice, again, more information on each of these laws that are out there. We talked about the California Rifle and Pistol Association. Their website is full of good information, as is the National Rifle Association. The San Diego County Gun Owners, SDCGO, our website contains a blog. It contains news information, links to other places, other sources of information, local officials that we endorse. It's a great place to find that kind of information. Volunteer opportunities, ton of information there. San Diego County Gun Owners. Cal Guns is another good source of information on this subject. So these are some resources that you could take a look at. So in conclusion, I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to this and watch this presentation. My name is Joe Drammissi. I'm a board member on the San Diego County Gun Owners. And I want to thank you all once again for listening, taking the time to do this, and encourage you to please get involved. If you're a gun owner out here, there are people that really do want to take these guns away from you, and you really want to take a look, and if this makes sense to you, you want to make your voice heard. So get involved with us, get involved with the other organizations, take a look at those resources, and make yourself heard and help us get our Second Amendment rights back and preserve them for the future. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed our presentation, please make sure the people you know view our presentation. Post it on your social media, email it, or just show your friends and family. Also, if you would like to have the presentation at a meeting or gathering, please do not hesitate to reach out to San Diego County Gun Owners, and we will get it set up. Our email is info@sdcgo.org.
Without someone doing something about it, it's not going to get any better.